us today are 5 students who went to Normandy, France over Easter break. They are Noah Olivio. Hello. Kenny Blank.
Hello.
Michael Silva.
Hello.
Aiden Joffrey.
Hello.
And Grayson.
Hello.
Jenny. and over Easter break, they got to visit a number of sites in and around Normandy. And so what we're going to talk about today on the podcast is some of those sites that they got to see. And I thought the first one we would kind of look at, because obviously, actually, before we do that, just, and whoever wants to answer, just kind of, you grab the mic. What do you think was the biggest takeaway for you getting to see all these locations? Our trip went to England, where we talked about the Blitz, Churchill Museums, and we went down to Portsmouth, did their version of D-Day, and then obviously Omaha Beach and all the things on D-Day. So what did you get out of the trip? What was the most significant thing for you? Michael.
I would say that it's putting a face to the name. Like, no matter how much you read about it, doesn't matter how many textbooks, how many books you read, how many pictures you see, actually going to a place and being there is way different than like just reading about it or watching a movie or a TV show.
Okay, Kenny.
I agree with Michael, but I also have a different takeaway, and my takeaway is that this war affected, like, obviously all of Europe, but like you get to see it in all these different places that we went. Like in England, they like the city was destroyed like completely. They had to rebuild, and they talked about that a lot, how they were going to keep the old and bring back bring the new. And in Normandy, it was also like, it just like you could see how it affected them, because they kept all the gun emplacements and the bunkers and stuff. And then in France, it's a completely different story, because it was like left untouched mostly, but they still remember it because they talk about their occupation there. And I think that was very moving to me.
By France, I'm assuming you mean Paris.
I mean, yes, Paris.
Yeah. Paris doesn't necessarily get bombed. What they do have in Paris is a series of plaques all over for in memory of resistance people who died as well. Grayson.
What I took away from it is that you really get a sense of scale. Like when you're reading about it, you can read like 500 miles, 200 miles. But when you actually get there, you can really see how far this spanned, how much it affected. You get to go through all the little towns, and really, like, a lot of these little towns will have memorials. Like most of the memorials we went to, while we did go to a lot of big ones, sometimes it would just be in like a random field that wouldn't be in this big town. It's just like a small little town with a little plaque. And you really got to see how it affected like these small regions and all these areas.
Okay, very good. Aiden?
I also had something similar to Michael, that no matter how much you read about it, it's actually putting your feet on the ground, especially at Omaha Beach. It was kind of amazing to actually feel what it was like to actually be there and just like visualize what it's like to be there.
Hear the waves crashing, see the cliffs and everything else.
Exactly.
Okay. Noah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree just being there is a completely different experience than reading about it. I'd recommend to everyone to be able to go at least once, especially if you're interested in this topic. And on the beaches specifically, you could really just see, especially when we were there with the way the water rises so quickly. I mean, you can just imagine that trying to storm the beaches on D-Day.
So to put in perspective, because we have students who weren't there kind of just watching this, when we were on Omaha Beach, we were, good 50, 60 feet out or so. And we're just talking on the beach, and in the middle of our conversation, which was very brief, because I gave very brief talks on this trip, water started hitting our feet, right? And the group had to move, and we had to move, I think 3 times on Omaha Beach just to get away from the water, because the tide rose that fast. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So on our board, I have a picture. Everybody recognize that? Yeah, right. So Pointe du Hoc is such an interesting place. It's the site just off of Omaha Beach. Cliffside, 120 foot cliff. It's going to be scaled by the Army Rangers, and 225 of them are going to scale this cliff, led by Colonel Rudder, and they're going to take it from the Nazis. The idea was that there was some anti-ship batteries there and some artillery cannons that could possibly rain terror down to Omaha Beach. But what ends up happening in it is this really small arms battle that lasts into the night. That's really kind of devastating for this Army Ranger group. So for the guys who went, I wanted to ask, we had talked about Pointe du Hoc. We had mentioned it. We had talked about how like it was kind of a crazy mission to begin with. Once you actually got there, what Like what kind of goes through your mind when you're there?
So for one thing, when you get there, you can see all the craters left by the shelling that occurred before the Army Rangers began to scale it. And for me, that left the impression that no matter how much, like how many preparations were took, it would still be difficult because this was so well fortified. And I mean, I remember hearing the story of the person who called it a suicide mission before they went on it. And like, that's also like crazy to hear because like they're an Army Rangers division. That's like the best of the best almost. And to hear that from someone, it's
Yeah, and these were, I mean, them and the paratroopers, right? These are the best of the best that the Army produces. And on the screen, we kind of have the craters kind of so you can see them. Michael, looked like you had something you want to say.
I think that once you get there, like you can read about it. Like I said earlier, reading about it doesn't really do it justice. But when you walk over to a bunker and see how thick the walls are, how deep they're dug in, and how big the holes are for the guns to stick out of, you see how like impenetrable and like hardened these bunkers are, and how much it could have affected the battle, and how the guys who did climb that 120-foot cliff, which 120 feet, you can read about it, doesn't really it seems tall, but it's not. Like in perspective, when you go to the edge, it's way higher than you would think. So like the guys that actually went up that, it's a testament to their bravery and how dedicated they were to what they do.
Yeah, and so on the screen I have a couple pictures of the impact craters. These are craters that were made by naval bombardment during the Battle of Pointe du Hoc, some before it. What was it like? Because we had described those, I told you about them. What was it like actually seeing those impact craters litter that entire landscape?
It kind of felt similar to being in like a trench at World War One, similar with how all the craters around us. And like walking into the bunker, I had like this grim feeling just walking in and like looking out into the water. I also saw like a cargo ship. I can only imagine like seeing like a destroyer just out in the open. It was really crazy.
Yeah, or seeing this armada of ships and then hundreds of thousands of ships coming. Noah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know what to expect when we were talking about the craters. I knew they were big. I didn't expect them to be as big as they were when we saw them, and just the amount of them. I mean, there was one. I mean, everywhere you look, there was a huge crater that obviously was left.
So, in terms of just scope, Pointe du Hoc, definitely worthwhile seeing. What was it like being able to go up? Because it was actually, unlike a couple of years ago, the last time Holy Cross students were on this trip, you got to go up to the edge of Pointe du Hoc and see where the Rangers climbed up. What was that like? Seeing the actual place where they did it.
It really put into perspective the height of how tall it was, and it showed how like difficult that actually would have been.
Not only that, looking down, it's like a sheer cliff, obviously, but also it's windy. So you have to face the fact that these people using grappling hooks had to experience like really treacherous winds and bullet fire and their own armada shooting on them to hear that sound and those concussion craters and all that. And it just puts in perspective the bravery of these people and how like determined they were to take down this evil regime.
All right, Grayson.
I feel like I didn't really anticipate it to be that steep. Like you don't really feel it until you see it. And if any of y'all want to see it, I do have some pictures like just on the side of the cliff, and it really gives you a much better perspective of like what they went through. When I was first reading about it, I thought it was like a small mountain, but when you really look off the side, it's just like a drop, and like it's just like, yeah, like that. You don't think that. You think it's kind of like slanted over where these people can kind of like rope up it. No, it is actual rock climbing. Like they don't have anywhere to like mount themselves.
And they're being shot at.
Yeah, and they're being shot at.
Yeah, I think Pointe du Hoc is just one of those iconic places to visit. We talked about, and we listened to the Ronald Reagan speech that was given there. We said President Biden gave a speech there. It's one of these very iconic places. When you visit Normandy, you kind of visit Pointe du Hoc. Does anyone from the class have any questions about Pointe du Hoc? Joey, come on up, Joe. You got a Joey Timpany is going to come up and ask a question. He skipped out on our trip. He didn't want to hang out with these guys. I don't blame him. But no, Joey, what's your question?
Thank you, Mr. Fudge, for that beautiful introduction. Because I don't really like you guys. But no, I wanted to ask, like, going inward from like from the initial point where y'all went to the actual bunker where they climbed up at, like, what was it like to kind of go out from there? Like what did it look like past the bunker initially?
Going from the cliff, moving back there, right on the cliff, there is an initial bunker. And as you go back, there's a couple more bunkers spread about, but you're on a trail that is kind of winding in between all of these shell impacts because they have them now roped off because people would get stuck in them because they were like 18 feet deep. But as you would get past the bunkers, you would move into a wooded area that they described it as like, that's where the guns that they thought were installed were actually hidden because they weren't installed in the bunkers at the time of the actual landings. So it goes from this like mountain, like kind of cliff face to bunkers and a field to a wooded area past that.
Yeah, and the guns would have been located in that wooded area. And then there's bunkers all throughout it. Like there's little concrete emplacements, and then obviously all the crater holes. So no, very, very good question. We did a whole bunch of other stuff. Obviously, Point Hawk wasn't the only thing that we did. If one of the guys wants to kind of comment, what was the most surprising sight that you saw? Something that was like actually like I didn't realize this was going to be something that intrigued me or you know that we interacted with. What would you say the most surprising sight was? We saw so many sights.
I would say the most surprising thing to me was just the countryside and the land there. Like it was beautiful. You'd expect a place that had such a horrible event like happen there that it would have some sort of a scar or some sort of like an obvious sign that it happened, but it's just a countryside. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful land.
I thought it was the most surprising thing, like seeing how wide the actual beaches were, because like from the book, I can only imagine like a certain small section, but it was actually like a 5 mile long beach or more.
Yeah. And each beach is pretty long, right? We're talking a front of almost 60 miles. And actually the picture that we have up here is again from a few years ago, but that pier was the one that we were near, right? And so to put in perspective for the guys in the room, we were probably 50 to 100 feet in the water, and this is how close the sea gets. So it expands outward and inward rather rapidly. So what else? What are some other sites that you guys thought were kind of? Again, it could be something that was surprising to you, something that stood out. Yeah,
there was I forgot the name of the bridge, but we're at this little bridge, and there's a little monument describing like a little battle is happening. It was really cool to see like little monuments showing like a guy having an AT gun just shooting at a German tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Leffier Bridge. Leffier Bridge is an interesting site, and it might come up in the pictures at some point because it's definitely on these. But Leffier Bridge is considered to be the site of the largest small arms battle in the history of the United States Army. 82nd Airborne combined with some glider soldiers, eventually some 101st, are all going to be fighting over this tiny little bridge, right? That's no wider than a classroom. Michael, you're a water expert. You did not think the Merdier River was very big. How would you describe it?
That was a creek.
It was a very small river. However, in 1944, what was the difference?
The Nazis had opened the floodgates to all the small rivers and streams in Normandy, flooding almost all of the fields around that area. So that creek, what I call a creek, which would probably be about 5 to 6 feet deep on a normal basis, would have been probably closer to 10 to 12, with the surrounding like farmland flooded with 3 to 4 feet of water.
Right. So the whole area is flooded, and the only way in or out are the roads that are they're going to
barely above the water line.
Yeah, barely above the water line. And so if you're the Germans, how do you defend that? Right. You defend the roads. So what was it like? I know some of y'all got to go up to anybody go over the bridge?
I did.
Okay. So just going over it and realizing that this, very intense small battle was there. What was that like for you?
It was kind of mind-boggling that such a small like objective could have been the site of such a large battle and such importance. It was, I don't remember the number of soldiers there, But I mean, it was a small group, but they took massive casualties for their numbers. And the memorial there showed, like, it was a great memorial to the actual battle that happened there. I believe it was 2 German tanks taken out.
Yep.
Like just before the bridge to allow the U.S. tanks to push through and the Allied tanks to push through and take the larger city down the road.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, Lafayette Bridge is kind of one of those sites that's really kind of awe-inspiring. But speaking of awe-inspiring, what about the cemetery? Going to the cemetery at Normandy. I know, Kenny, before you had mentioned it, and some of you have seen it, like in the class we had seen Saving Private Ryan. What was it like actually going to the cemetery?
I'd say that from my experience, it's very somber to see all these like graves, 9,000 crosses and stars of Judah. That's very like overwhelming to you, but it's in a way it's beautiful, the monuments that they built for these people and the way that these people were celebrated for their heroic actions. And for me, it was kind of like, it was a very somber experience, but it kind of gave me hope because like these people were celebrated. And I think that's wonderful because they did a very heroic thing for the world.
Similar to Kenny, I had this somber feeling, and as I was there sitting near the cemeteries, all I could hear was just all I can imagine is like all the soldiers just resting there peacefully and the trees blowing, the birds tweeting. It was very peaceful, at the same time sad.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us can say we felt that sad feeling at the cemetery. But what stuck out to me was just how beautiful it was. I mean, that was probably surprisingly one of the most beautiful sights that we saw during the trip. And to me, like the statues that they had and just the gravity of it, just seeing the graves go on and on. I mean, what was it, 9,000 crosses? I mean, it just went on forever.
Being in the cemetery was... It was a really somber feeling. It was one of those, like, you kind of felt bad talking in that, like, in the place, because it was one of those sites where you're like, needs to be respectful. My grandparents travel a lot and they're huge history nuts, and our hometown had a soldier die at another site that we went to, one of the churches we went to, where his friend had been caught on the steeple of the church, and he died trying to help his friend and to save his friend's life. It was Sergeant John P. Ray, and Coach Arvides and I were able to locate his grave in the cemetery and place a American flag decently close to it, as close as we could get. It shows how, while there are so many people there, there's still, each person still has a story, and each person still has roots and a background that can be traced.
What was it like seeing somebody that was from your hometown and just recognizing that there was a grave from somebody that was right near where, you know, you're from? It hit home, because you think like this guy, he would have been around our age. He would have been between the ages of 18 and 22. So right in about that range. We're all 18 or 19 in the room. So seeing someone that lived in an area that you live in now and walked around the streets that you probably still walk today shows you that it could have been anyone. It could be you in the future. It could have been you then. It's just, it shows you how lucky you are and how thankful you should be to the people who fought for your freedom and fought for the things that you enjoy today. Yeah, and sometimes that's the story, right? Is that you have all these different gravestones. Some of them are for older people, right? Obviously, there's a couple of generals in there. And then some of them are for people who were just getting their lives started. And so for John P. Ray, he had a wife. Her name was Paula, and they were planning to have a family and all that stuff. But it all stopped, in the early mornings of June 6th. One place that we went to it was the first place we went to in Normandy was St. Damien de la Combe, and we got to hear a story about two medics, right? Robert Wright and Ken Moore. What did you guys take away from the story of these two medics? Yeah, Kenny.
So these two medics set up a base in a church, aid station in a church, and they provided help for any soldier who passed by, no matter what, who they served, if they were Nazi or Allied, and they helped them. And I think that's very brave. And, inspiring that these people could help someone, like, no matter what. They did it in a place that's not optimal, and it was like near the place of an invasion, like, and they were helping people. And I think that's,
it was at the invasion site, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is the paratroopers landing on June 6th. And so, as Kenny said, they set up an aid station and they treat over 70 plus people, Germans and U.S. soldiers alike. And it really kind of an inspiring story. Grayson, you had something you wanted to add to it?
I was thinking about how to put in words. It's a really heartwarming story, how people can get past their differences. And like, even though you're a soldier fighting on the other side, you can still like aid somebody that's like fighting against your morals, but like, they're still human, and that like it's your obligation to help them, even if they're against what you stand for. And then you also talked about how like, even in the midst of battle, they put away their weapons. They had like a little gate out of,
Yeah, it was
like,
a little
outside.
fence.
Yeah, a little fence where people would put away their weapons, stow their weapons before they came inside. And it was kind of like a silent contract stating that they would not have violence inside of the church.
Yeah, very good.
It was still really cool to see how, even though like 82 years ago now, that there's still relics of the war, how the like one seat still had a blood stain, like in the middle of the church, a mortar went through the ceiling and like hit directly in the middle of the church, but it didn't explode. And it was really cool to see like the little crater impact it had.
Yeah. And then I know some of you guys brought up the fact that the little old lady who opens up the doors, right? I mean, she's been there since the event happened. And so I think that was pretty cool too. Michael?
The crater that Aiden mentioned with the mortar shell, it just shows how, even though like the event was so chaotic, like there's still a shining moment when a mortar shell comes through the roof and it doesn't explode. It just shows how there was divine intervention, and like the chances of that actually happening are so low for that mortar to not go off. It shows that there was help there.
Okay, very good. So I guess we can kind of, what for you, and we'll leave Paris out of this, right? We got to see Notre Dame, which was really cool, right? Bells ringing, got to see another cathedral in Normandy and Bayeux. What would you say, if you had to like pinpoint, what was the highlight of the trip? Well, what site for you was the highlight for it? You can make Noah go first if you want.
Yeah, I think that the highlight of the trip for me was probably the beach. Just seeing the scale of the beaches. We've talked about it, we've read about it, we've all mentioned that. Just seeing how tall these things that the men had to scale and go through this. And again, the part with the water was probably the highlight of the trip. Just seeing that water rise so quickly and just imagining what the guys that stormed the beaches had to go through during that.
Kenny?
So for me, the best part of the trip had to be the American cemetery for the D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. Again, it just left this impression of me that, these people did sacrifice for us, and it is important that we respect their memory and we celebrate them, because they are like the heroes that saved us and allowed us to have this life that we cherish so much today.
Michael?
I would say just driving around the countryside, going from spot to spot, seeing the connections of all of the people there and the events, but also the individual stories of what actually happened in those places. It just shows that it's more than just a big picture. It's more than just the invasion. It's the paratroopers. It's the individual guy who was able to hide out and stay like uncaptured.
Okay.
For my highlight, I would say like going to Point du Hoc and actually getting to the bunker, because like everyone has seen like a bunch of World War II movies of like U.S. soldiers raiding a bunker. It's actually cool. Actually, like imagine myself as the soldier like raiding the bunker. It was a little scary too, because like it felt like with how dark it was, it kind of felt like I was in a dark tunnel being there.
All right. And Jenny?
I would say for my highlight is definitely how Silva was mentioning how like they still have all the little places. My thing would be probably how like when you travel around, there's all the little monuments, and they're not forgetting. They all have like their little areas, their little stories. And then even in those areas, you can see like the shops around them. They'll have different like D-Day shops or Normandy shops. I went to a restaurant and all their stuff was themed. Like they had a thing called a Sherman burger. It was just it's kind of silly now, but it's good to see that these people, they're not forgetting what happened and they're not dwelling on it like it's a sad thing, but they're celebrating it and they're being like, they're treating it as how it should be treated, as like, we can't forget, we must remember, and we must stay solemn about it. It's not like a funny topic, but we don't have to dwell on it like it's something sad.
All right. Well, guys, as we close out, any last words about maybe the importance of travel and seeing things for yourself, or, encouraging for those guys who might be on the fence of doing a trip like this?
Well, for me, my entire family went, including my grandparents, and it was very it's going to be a great memory for me that I saw all these historic sites and I had to experience it with them. And they were telling me about like how awesome it was to learn and see these sites. And like that, I always cherish this moment because I got to see it and I got to see it with the people I love.
My thing is go. If you have the opportunity to go see something, to go travel somewhere, to learn about something, go. It's you won't regret it.
Just maybe bring some Tabasco sauce, right, Michael?
1000%.
I think it's incredibly important to be there because a lot of people, we could see pictures and people would say like, oh, these pictures are fake, but it's actually really mind blowing to actually be there and see the pictures in person.
Thank you, guys. It was a great trip. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. And this is Tigers by the Fire. Thank you.